in brightest day, in blackest night. All other podcasts tremble in fright. Losers cower before the power. Oranges lust and blues you can trust. Indigos feel and white ones heal. Yellow scare and green ones dare. That sapphire love and black hands glove will rock your foundation without hesitation. Chad and Mars face evil's might. Respect their power, for they'll make you see the light.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Bokelman.
I'm Mark Marble.
And this is the LanternCast.
Episode 431.
That is right. What are we talking about tonight?
Godzilla versus Kong. That's the main course.
Yeah. And the appetizers.
Which we've had really good luck with those the last 2 weeks. I mean, we should stick to doing Thursday recordings again because not obviously for the same week it's coming out, but there's been last two times there's been some DC news and stuff right before we recorded. So right this evening as we're recording this, which is April 1st, and this is not an April Fool's joke. Not that I think anybody would care all that much one way or the other. But two WB DC movies have been officially axed from the schedule. You have James Wan's The Trench, which was a Aquaman spinoff from those monster things that were in the original Aquaman, and Ava DuVernay's New Gods, which Tom King was supposed to be writing it with her, if I remember correctly. But both of those have now officially been deep sixed.
Yeah, I didn't have much hope for The Trench being a thing anyways when they announced it. I mean, it seemed to me like they were just building The Trench film off of the success of that one scene and how like cinematically that looked in the Aquaman film. Because cinematically speaking, at least, that's one of the big scenes in Aquaman that a lot of people were talking about, just how awesome that looked. I guess since The Trench is the one kingdom that they didn't really go too deep into, I guess it would have had to been a prequel, right? Just talking about that kingdom and how they evolved into these monsters.
I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. It always seemed a rather impulsive decision.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, this, which happens a lot. We have these projects that are really successful, and it's like, oh, let's do this spinoff, and we're going to do this spinoff, and we're going to do that. And the majority of the time, that's not really, doesn't seem to be a particularly effective or smart strategy. You either dilute your product super quick, or they crash and burn one way or the other. And this obviously just crashed and burned long before it ever got, before the camera. And I I never was interested in that project, even though the fact that James Wan was going to be doing it made me more interested than I would have been compared to The New Gods, which again, it seems like weekly now. Every episode I get to profess my dislike and disinterest in The New Gods, but that was another project from the moment it was announced that seemed it never made a lot of sense. I mean, The New Gods, if you're not a comic book fan, you don't know anything about The New Gods. If you are a comic book fan, a large percentage of comic book fans don't care about The New Gods. I know we've talked about this. Some people like Tom King stuff, but I think the bloom has come off his rose a lot, especially with Heroes in Crisis, which almost everybody didn't like. And Ava DuVernay, the bloom, whatever bloom was on her rose briefly kind of completely blew off into the wind thanks to the Disney movie that I just drew a blank on that she directed.
Wrinkle in Time?
Yes, yours, Wrinkle in Time. So it didn't seem like this was a really good match to begin with, subject-wise. And like I mentioned to Chad before we started recording, I was just thinking about that movie not too long ago, probably because we've been talking about The New Gods just so much over the last month on this show, that we haven't heard anything about this project, which is really weird when you hear nothing. That's like hearing about Jeff Johns' Green Lantern Corps movie for the last 6 years. And, you know, either it's never going to happen or it's never going to be the project it was supposed to be. If year after year after year, you don't hear anything about it. At least something with the Flash movie, you constantly heard about it. It just kept going from one director to the next and losing this person and losing that person attached to it. But at least they were pretty consistent that, yes, we're making this movie. You just didn't hear anything about this movie. And it just, I don't know. I thought the timing is interesting because, as we know, and from the Snyderversers, who are just like, they're like, and again, this may not be applicable to all of you, but once again, it seems like it's a vocal minority of a vocal minority. It's bringing you all down. That the idea that the Snyderversers are just like this toxic cancer on the DC fan base right now. And it's interesting because I saw an article about all these cancellations, and it's like they can have two different views on this and entirely still wrap it around the Snyderverse. There was one group that said, oh, this proves DC doesn't know what they're doing, so restore the Snyderverse. And there was another group that said, oh, they're doing this because they're going to restore the Snyderverse. And it's like, oh my God, just shoot us, please. The only thing that might be true, though, is all your moaning and bitching probably may have sped up the cancellation of this project, even though it probably was going to be canceled anyway. But knowing that they were going to be delving into characters in situations and worlds that Snyder had been dealing with and just touched in the Snyder Cut, people were going to rip into this left and right. We've restored the Snyder Cut. People were going to be savaging this movie, and we are completely unwilling to accept it because, oh, you should be giving this to Snyder. You should be letting him touch this, and so it's ridiculous. I think WB made the right move in probably dumping both of these projects. But again, right now there isn't anything WB is going to do that's going to make these Snyderverse people happy. It's complaining after the other and blaming this and blaming that. So the timing is interesting, whether it's related to all the Snyderverse stuff or not. But one way or the other, it's going to be being wrapped up as almost becoming a referendum somehow again on the Snyder Cut and the fans' reaction to it. Yeah, so that's today's news.
Yeah, Ava DuVernay tweeted a photo of her and Tom standing side by side. It says, Tom, I loved writing New Gods with you. I'm upset that the saga of Barda, Scott, Granny, Highfather, and the Furies ends this way. Diving into Kirby's Fourth World was the adventure of a lifetime. That can't be taken away. Thank you for your friendship, and remember, #DarkSideIs, to which Tom King responded, Ava, I'm so incredibly proud of the work we did. It was such a joy seeing you bring your passion and talent to these characters. I really felt Kirby's legacy was being honored here, and I wish we could have kept going. That one Barda Scott scene where ellipses, damn.
Oh, they just have to do that tease. Except nobody probably cares.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. Like, I agree with you. I don't care too much about the New Gods. Well, when I say New Gods, I'm including, I guess what I'm saying is Fourth World. I don't care about the Fourth World too much. If I were to care about it, I care more about New Genesis than I do Apocalypse.
Yes.
With Tom King's involvement, I just have to feel like this would have been Scott focused, Mr. Miracle. And he would have been our POV character, him and Barda. So it makes me think that this thing may be done as a movie. I don't know that what was dreamt up here is done forever. Maybe some version of it will exist as a series, an animated movie, something like that. I don't know that the work that went into this story is gone forever. I think it has potential to exist in some fashion or another just down the line. I would have been interested in something that was more Scott focused, that could have given us a glimpse from their POV into things. And Scott's history with New Genesis and Apocalypse in particular, that's a very tortured, tragic background that could give people a good entryway. And Scott's a very kind of goofy and relatable character too, at times. And Barda's the kind of woman who's like, can crush a watermelon between her thighs, and you're just like, sit on my face. But
hashtag sit on my face.
But I've always thought Barda was a really cool character. I don't know much about her, but she's one of those characters that, first of all, and I know what I said 2 seconds ago, but I'm not talking about her looks here. But her costume is really interesting looking. It's really cool. Which was it? Superman Unbound? Was that the one where was that the animated movie where Supergirl shows up crashing into Metropolis and all of that?
I'm not sure. It sounds familiar.
Either way, I'm pretty sure Bardo was a part of that. And the way they animated her, obviously they made her a very tall, sexy woman and things like that. But when she put on her outfit, her costume, it just looked really cool, even just animated. And then her history with the Furies, like between her and Scott, like they have this antagonistic relationship with the Fourth World insofar as, and forgive me guys, I don't read a lot of Fourth World, but the way I understand it is they obviously have very contentious relationships with everything that's going on Apocalypse. Barda because of the Furies and Granny Goodness, and then Scott because of the torture that Granny Goodness put him through and things like that. So there's a lot that they have against that specific thing. But if I'm not mistaken, they also have, I don't want to say a bad relationship, but I want to say maybe an uneasy relationship with New Genesis, and how New Genesis is sort of hands off with Apocalypse, and whatever Apocalypse wants to do, Apocalypse will do, and the two worlds are supposed to be separate. I've seen scenes, of course, where, Big Barda or Scott will talk, nicely, of course, or reverentially or whatever to Highfather or Orion, but I've seen him, I'm pretty sure I've seen him go toe to toe a little bit in terms of heated discussions. So that sort of dynamic would have been cool to see. With as popular as Tom King's Mr. Miracle series was, I didn't read it, but I heard about it everywhere. So I can't imagine that there wasn't a big faction of people who did actually want to see this film, despite you and I's general disinterest in all things Fourth World. And of course you have to talk about the people, the comic purists and stuff like that, who are, just going to be happy to see anything Kirby faithfully adapted.
That's true. But again, it's not just my personal, my emotional or my lack thereof feelings when it comes to the New Gods. I don't think that many people are passionate about the New Gods. I think. And we know they're overplayed to begin with. They were overplayed even before we got the Snyder cut. It's just constant, especially in the book. So I don't know. I'm not saying, I shouldn't say there would be no interest. I think there's a whole bunch of other properties people would be more interested in. Again, and the non-comic book fan, the non-diehard comic book fan, because you can be a basic comic book fan and know a lot of the A-tier characters and still be clueless regarding the New Gods. You may have heard of Darkseid, but you may not know anything about anybody else, even if you've heard of them. So I still think it's fair to say the majority of non-diehard comic book fans would have no clue about them. They might not have a little bit more of a clue than the Eternals. Yeah. But still, I mean, it's very, it's very similar kind of thing anyway. So.
All right. I was thinking I do have something, but we can just wait until later just to see if the episode goes too long, then I can save it for another episode down the line. So yeah, let's just get into the Godzilla versus Kong talk.
So what did you think?
So I enjoyed it. Look, guys, I think we have to put the veil over all of this, the sheen, and say at the start and say, I think when you are going to review or discuss a movie like this or critique it in any way, you have to always consider the intent. It won't color our opinions, or we won't withhold from saying certain things about the film, because regardless, the points are valid in any way, shape, or form. But in some respects, this it's supposed to be a straight up monster fight movie. That's what it is. So while it's completely valid, you can talk all you want about the lack of character development or the lack of story or plot or interest or inherent logic to whatever happens in the human side of the story. That you say all you want, but at the end of the day, this is supposed to be a monster fight movie. That's the title is straight up Godzilla versus Kong. They didn't try to come up with Godzilla 4 Path to the Hollow Earth. Like they didn't try to do any of that. Like it's just straight up, look, here's the title. It's a fight movie, Godzilla versus Kong. So you have to go in with that. But that being said, I do see some of the criticism about some of the human stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I thought action wise, it was really great because this is something I've said for a long time. If you go back to the other episodes where we talked about Godzilla related films in this new, it's Legacy, right? I think the Legacy Monsterverse. So the first Godzilla film, I think, was it 2014 or 2016? 2014, I think.
14.
That one was, I've said this, a billion times. That one was dark, and I mean visually dark. That movie, if I want to rewatch it, if I'm going to rewatch it in the daytime, the blinds have to be drawn, the curtains got to be closed if there's a curtain, the lights have to be off, because there are lots of scenes in that movie where what is happening on screen is so dark, I cannot have any sort of reflection or bounce back on the screen if I want to see what the hell is happening crystal clear. I'm going to save Skull Island. Skull Island is almost its own beast, no pun intended. The problem that I just mentioned with the first Godzilla movie got a little bit better in King of the Monsters, but there was a lot of darkness because, the Antarctica scenes, then you had the anytime Ghidorah showed up, like a storm followed in his wake, so naturally everything was a little bit darker, but it became, visually speaking, a brighter and brighter film. And then in this one, you've got Kong versus Godzilla happening, it's either daybreak or sunset, whatever. I think it's daybreak in the ship, so it's full and there's fire all around, and then you have Hong Kong with all the neon lights, and then the stuff and obviously, guys, spoilers, the stuff with Mechagodzilla busting out of the mountain happens at daybreak in Hong Kong, so the lighting is all there. You can see the action really crystal clear. The stuff that's happening in the Hollow Earth is really cool. So visually speaking, I don't know if I didn't hold up a stopwatch to the film and clock the amount of monster fight time we have in this movie versus King of the Monsters and compare the two or whatever. That didn't really matter. We got enough of it that I thought we saw enough of the Titans, and that was cool. And what we saw was bright and colorful, and the CGI was really cool. And the battle sequences were really cool. I think that's all I can say right now, generally speaking. I did enjoy it, and I'm going to have to watch it a couple of more times, rather watch the whole universe a couple of more times from 2014, then into Skull Island, then the King of the Monsters, and then to this. I think I want to watch Skull Island. I'll do a watch through where I watch Skull Island first, and then the others. See if that does anything for me. But it may be my favorite of them. Maybe. I was so happy when the first Godzilla movie came out, just to have Godzilla back, that I think I might have amped that one up. But the series, so two things. The darkness I mentioned, the visual darkness of that film, knocks it down several pegs. It shouldn't have to be pitch black in my room to watch a fucking movie. And the other thing was the villains being the Mutos. I was happy to have Godzilla back, but you couldn't have given me a recognizable villain. You couldn't have given me anything that looked like something I'm familiar with. And then, so it might be my favorite though, Godzilla versus Kong. We'll have to wait and see. But generally speaking, I think I'm done on the general there. So what did you feel about it?
I watched this pretty much at 3:00 in the morning once it was available on Wednesday morning. I watched it all the way through. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I speed watched some scenes even during the first time because they were just, as we'll talk about specifics, there were just some parts of the movie, some of the human stuff that really I didn't care about. I know it served a plot point. So when Mechagodzilla shows up at the end, it's not like, what? Where did he come from? I understand it was there for a reason, but it didn't make it any more overly compelling for me. Maybe it was easier to do that because I also was running on E and it's 3:00 in the morning and I still have to get up, 3-4 hours after this movie ends. So at some point I will try to actually sit there and watch it without forwarding anything. But I super speed watched it last night just to go back and watch the things that were important. The initial thoughts, of course, and they'll roll into specific stuff in a few minutes. The initial thoughts were, first of all, this really isn't a Godzilla movie. This is a Kong movie, which is fine because I'm a Kong guy. But going in, be aware that this is not an equal screen time representation of each monster, while each monster is relevant to the plot. The whole story from beginning to end in this movie is Kong's story. It begins with Kong's situation on Skull Island and ends with Kong getting a new home on Hollow Earth and everything. In the journey in between, he gets more screen time. Part of the reason why probably there's more daytime scenes in this movie with the monsters is because obviously for whatever reason, maybe because there's a real life model to use for this, that Kong must be easier, you would assume, and or cheaper to CGI, because even in Skull Island, most of the stuff with him was during the day. And since most of the movie is about Kong, you see Kong most of the time in relatively well-lit situations. I want to accept this movie for what it is and not be nitpicky about or be unhappy with some parts of it. But it's hard because you mentioned the 2014 movie with the Mudos. The Mudos were really friggin' lame adversaries based on their power set, based on who Godzilla was. And Godzilla had a hard time beating those guys. The reality is, well, yes, Kong technically won one round in this fight. The first part of the Hong Kong fight, Kong won because Godzilla was down, buried. Whether he was out cold or not, we don't know. But Kong was already up and ready to go before Godzilla got up. But Kong really didn't do well at all against Godzilla. I know Godzilla tech has advantages over him. I understand that. But it still bothers me that Kong didn't do better against Godzilla. At least in the Hong Kong part. The water part, he did fairly well until he basically Godzilla started pulling him down. He did fairly well considering, the water should be a clear advantage for Godzilla. But Kong did fairly well up until, then. And so I could live with that. Just like, how they saved Kong at the end with jump starting him. We'll talk about that more. I could live. But the thing that really bothered me the most is that Kong was always getting saved. So he became like a new member of my Karate Kid syndrome club, where if you're so good at what you do, then how come someone's always helping pick you up off the floor? I was okay with the save with the restarting his heart. I was okay with the depth charges to confuse Godzilla. It really bothered me what they did on Hollow Earth when that bat-like thing had him wrapped up. Now, it doesn't mean Kong wouldn't have got out of it on his own, but that really bothered me because that kind of was a little emasculating, because basically every single fight we saw King Kong get into, that he needed help, and that just kind of like rubbed. That just, I don't know, it just rubbed, as objective as I want to be about it, it rubbed me the wrong way, especially when in the beginning in the little prologue, which was cute, when they're almost setting it up like an NCAA tournament, where on the left side you see Godzilla with all these Titans that Godzilla beat. And even though they don't show you any other Titans Kong beat, because they're only going with actual footage from we'd seen in other movies, that you could see on the right side, even though you don't see who Kong beat, that he basically beat all these other Titans on the right side. So the only two that were left standing that hadn't squared off yet were Kong and Godzilla. That part I liked. I also was willing to accept some of how Kong did in this fight, because sometimes directors say stuff which is complete garbage, but sometimes they say stuff which is really relevant to the movie you're about to see. And when Adam Wingard pretty much described Kong pretty much as like this old gunslinger who basically has seen better days and he's not happy in the situation that he's in, and he doesn't really want to fight anymore, but he's not going to walk away from it if it basically gets put on his doorstep. I really tried to focus in on that, because when you look at it from the perspective that Kong is probably past his prime, that this is probably not vintage King Kong at this point, considering how old he is, despite his height and strength, that this is and his mindset, because you actually get such a good insight into what he's thinking. I guess you could kind of maybe understand it a little more. It just kind of bothered me, considering how Godzilla did in the other movies against the people that he fought, that King Kong never really seemed to do. He had moments, he did some cool things. Obviously, drop kicking was very successful for him, since he did it like twice to Godzilla in the water and once in Hong Kong. And his agility, they did a good job showing off his agility in this movie. I don't think they did as good a job with his strength, but his intelligence, his ability to strategize, his agility. But there's just something that still irks me about, plus when he loses a fight in Hong Kong, I'm like, he's out for a while. If he was just, and I know that plays into the how he gets jump started and everything, but if he had just been out for a little bit and then he woke up, then still technically speaking, he would have lost. But I don't know. You're going to disagree more because you're a Godzilla guy, just like it probably didn't throw you to see Mechagodzilla beat the living piss out of Godzilla, and he did beat the living piss out of Godzilla. He actually beat Godzilla worse than Godzilla beat Kong. To be fair, though, Mechagodzilla's heart was a hell of a lot more into beating Godzilla than I think Godzilla's heart was into beating Kong. He didn't necessarily want to kill him. He just wanted him to submit. Mechagodzilla, because of, and I'll let you talk about more about, what's driving Mechagodzilla, that there's something personal there, and he is beating the piss out of Godzilla on purpose. So, but again, it's going into some specifics about the fight that I just did, but not a lot of other things I want to talk about. Those are my initial. I liked it. I didn't love it. I probably think King of the Monsters was better, even though, again, I'm a Kong guy. It was a good Kong story. As far as who he is as a character, I think it was respectful on that level. I think it is interesting if we get a continuation of this legendary verse of what basically the world will think of King Kong, because you think Kong's going to come out looking, even though he didn't beat Godzilla one-on-one, he's going to look really good, because regardless of whether the real motives for why Godzilla did what he did are known to the world at this point, Godzilla did still destroy and kill a lot of people in this movie. So Kong is still going to come out looking like more of the hero than the two. That he stood up to Godzilla, and he was the one who stopped Mechagodzilla and all the stuff that. So reputation-wise, you would think Kong's popularity in the world would be extremely high at the end of this movie. Plus his relationship, with people and everything else is much different than we had seen in previous Kong movies. So I'd be interested to see if that were to continue. But I just think but it's something about it. The portrayal of Kong still kind of irked me when it came to the fighting with Godzilla. We knew he was going to lose. That was pretty much a given he was going to lose. But I thought they should have had him have a better moment in the sun against Godzilla. And he didn't have all that much of it.
You're right. I care more about Godzilla than I do Kong, but at the same time, dude, I'm a fan of the Toho monster universe. So when I say I root for Godzilla over Kong, it doesn't necessarily mean I don't like Kong or the times he was featured. So I agree with you in a lot of the stuff that you say. But kind of have to talk a little bit about where things are, because the end credits of King of the Monsters show several different articles and clippings, and one of them is something about how Skull Island is being destabilized or something like seismic activity or something. So that really helps get us to the point where Skull Island has now been officially overtaken by the storm that used to surround it. And this is, I want to say, 8 to 10 years ago, depending on how old Jai is, because apparently when the storm overtook Skull Island, it wiped out that indigenous population that we saw in the first Skull Island film. So that may contribute to Kong's sense of
despair.
Docileness, wanting to go into retirement, that sort of a thing, because they didn't really stress it super hard. But it was said that it was basically a symbiotic relationship. Like, Kong protects these people. And having lost those that he has been charged with protecting for so long, and only being able to save this one girl, and now his island is overtaken. Because you have to imagine they didn't build this stupid thing on Skull Island to contain Kong before the storm hit. It would have to have been done after. Trying to imagine building that massive thing in the dome and doing that all in the midst of a hurricane. I can't imagine doing that. It would have had to have been done before. So, or almost completed before. I'm trying to think of the logistics of it. But regardless, Kong has lost those that he is in charge of. He's in this dome. He knows it's fake because he attacks the damn thing every day, pretty much. And he's not like going out. He's not really acting that much different, because in the films, in Skull Island, the first film, it looks like he's just out for his daily walk when the helicopters show up. And then he sees somebody and he throws a palm tree at it, right?
Yep.
And then after he's done with that fight, he's just taking a stroll through the water, sits down, washes his wounds, takes a drink, and is like, oh shit, there's an octopus thing. Oh, I'm gonna eat it. Cool. You know, he's just strolling around the island, which is what he does here. So almost sort of the way that they keep saying Godzilla is on our side, he's okay unless he's provoked. Same thing with Kong. So you got to take that into consideration. Then you have the stuff with Godzilla, which, you know, to be fair, I did throw out a couple of different possibilities, but one of them ended up being right. Godzilla is attacking these places because that's where they're testing Mecha Godzilla, and he's sensing it. So, you know, that turned out to be right. But how they brought Mecha Godzilla to life is interesting to me. The whole, because we were talking a bit about how in the world does that end credit scene from King of the Monsters, where he goes to retrieve the head of Ghidorah, one of the heads of Ghidorah, play into this film. And it plays in the fact that they're using the sort of DNA, because they talk about genetic memory in this. So they're sort of tapped in to this creature. Plus, let's not forget, guys, Ghidorah is alien. Monster Zero is alien in origin, and he is supposed to have had regenerative properties. Now, while he's beheaded and his skull is there, I'm wondering if there's not still active DNA or brain or something inside of him, which is how they're able to get this sort of telepathic link to sync up. So once they shut down the connection and everything, and the connection is severed and the power goes into him, I think it's pretty much, regardless of the logistics of it, we have to be in agreement that at that point it's at least Ghidorah instinct that's piloting that thing.
At the very least, yes. I think there's probably more to it than that, but yeah. But again, like, referring to the memory, I think is important, because obviously at the end when he's about to kill Godzilla, the way he does it obviously is he remembers. It's not just random, because it's not like he was trying to pull Godzilla's jaw apart like Kong would do. He was about to basically shoot his version of lightning down his throat the way Godzilla does to everybody else.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. The fact that Godzilla is attacking these things, you know, Millie Bobby Brown's character talks about, why does he keep flashing an intimidation display when there's no other Titans around? So that was really cool. So that they went that far with it, that when Godzilla rolls up on these places, he's glowing, and that's not for effect in terms of like the film. That's got, you know, suddenly why is Godzilla using so much of his little lights and his blast? Well, because that's what he does when he's close to another Titan. So, which I wish they would have established that in the first Godzilla movie, but you know, they did talk about it. I mean, they made a whole fucking scene around it in King of the Monsters. It's an intimidation display. So that's cool. Hollow Earth was interesting. It really lent to the sci-fi in this film. You know, Journey to the Center of the Earth style and all that, but
right.
The way they went about it almost crosses the line into mystical magical. Like, it's somehow there's this otherworldly portal that spits you out down there. Like, I don't know what the hell. It's interesting. I don't think it's worth going into. But once we got down there, my one critique about it, other than, you know, it's an interesting design with everything being topsy-turvy and, you know, kind of gravity is off focus, so you can jump from the floor to the ceiling and, you know, invert everything and all that stuff. That's cool. That's whatever. Once we got down there, I wish they would have treated it more like Monster Island, you know, where we could have seen Ankira and some of the other monsters that we haven't seen yet, because they kept saying that the theory was that the Hollow Earth was where Titans came from, where they were bred. and we have like the little bitty pterodactyl things, and then we had like the two big snake winged things that he fights. But I would have liked to see more of the monsters.
They probably were just leaving that for potential sequels, I guess.
Maybe, but they kept doing these grand sweeping, kind of, scenery capture moments. And even if it was like distant background, seeing some things move, you wouldn't have had to go super in depth and close up. But, in the middle ground out in the distance, you see a ankylosaurus looking thing with a spiked shell and a clubbed tail, walking on all fours in the background, and like little Easter eggs that would have been interesting and cool. I think about this movie in several different contexts. There's some of the critiques people give it. I still think the critique of obviously the weakness of a large majority of the human plot is valid, but some people online are bashing this because of like the super crazy sci-fi tech that we suddenly get out of nowhere in this film. And I look at that the same way I look at that moment where Kong shoves the handle of the axe down Godzilla's throat, because that's a callback to Kong in one of the 60s or 70s movies, ripping a tree out of the ground and shoving it in Godzilla's mouth. That's supposed to be just like a little Easter egg for Godzilla fans. I think the same thing is true of like suddenly getting crazy tech, because how many times were you watching like 70s or 60s or 70s Godzilla flicks, and all of a sudden you go from like rural China to like a secret military base in the mountains that has super sci-fi tech that you've never dreamt of before, and funding unbelievable, and ABCD, like almost like it was like a freaking Bond villain base, and you're like, holy hell, how can anybody afford this? That's almost the fact that humans have some sort of hidden crazy advanced technology is almost as much of a staple of the Godzilla franchise as the fights themselves. So I didn't really have a problem with it. Again, it's a straight up monster fight movie, guys. Don't read too much into it. But I thought it was cool. But I keep also thinking about this film in terms of the future, because you kind of talked about this a little bit. I think about it in terms of, it feels like this movie's doing well. And I think we were saying for a while, Godzilla versus Kong is it. If this doesn't succeed, we're not going to get more films in this franchise, in this universe that they've built. It feels, so far at least, like it's succeeding. So let's then think about where it could head from here. In watching this film, what they have set up is nobody really knows about what Apex is doing or why, including Monarch for some reason. You would think that, although Monarch reports to the government, you would think that Monarch might know something, but apparently they don't know anything, and they've become more like disaster response and containment than anything. The people who quote unquote do know about what Apex has done think of it like a conspiracy theory. The man who leads Apex is a tech billionaire type who's in front of people saying, all this stuff about protecting the human species and blah, blah, blah. And then he's being proven right every time Godzilla attacks. Nobody in the public knows at this point or at the end of the film why Godzilla was attacking. Only we, the watchers, do. And then, of course, some members, I guess, of Monarch, once Millie Bobby Brown's character reports back and blah, blah, blah. But from the public perspective, all they saw was Godzilla attacking. Big ass monkey comes out of the ground to fight him. They fight. Monkey goes down. Apex, who they clearly have a facility in this mountain.
He's an ape, Chad. He's not a monkey.
Whatever. Apex has this facility in this mountain, but it's not hidden. Like the big part of it, the underground part of it, yes, but you can clearly see buildings built into the side of the mountain as well. So it's probably no secret that Apex has headquarters there. Suddenly, right when the city is under duress from two big titans fighting in it, Apex launches Mechagodzilla to fight Godzilla. Regardless of what happens with Mechagodzilla and his intent or whatever, that doesn't matter, because as the public, all they see is Apex releases Big Mecha to fight threatening titans. and seems to do a pretty darn good job of it until these two Titans team up to take it out. Now, we know intent and everything in here, but the public, all they see is our city's getting fucking trashed by these, let's face it, equivalent of nuclear bombs hitting our city, and just destroying everything in their wake. And at least Apex tried to stop it. Mecha got destroyed, but there's still some tech, obviously pieces of the tech, large chunks of the tech left on the rubble of the floor of the rubble of Hong Kong. So we've already seen that people try to recover things from these Titan fights, and the end credits of King of the Monsters reveals that like Titan DNA, like Titan droppings and stuff have been used for farming. The fact that the radiation the Titans give off, helps to bring vegetation to life, and then that vegetation is like new superfoods and things like that. So like there's a market out there for Titan stuff. So people would clearly be after recovering that tech, whether it's Apex or somebody else. And there's nothing in the film that says that the skull of Ghidorah was destroyed. So I'm just thinking in terms of Godzilla still would, in the next film, would have to be persona non grata, and someone would have to be actively going against him, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that when we hypothesized about what was going to really be going on with Godzilla, assuming it wasn't Mecha Godzilla in the T-800 skin, and he was just whether he was after something or being tricked into attacking, either way, which is both of those are kind of true. He was attacking for a reason, but obviously Apex was benefiting on the short term from a public relations perspective, that Godzilla was attacking all these places because it just makes Godzilla look like, oh yeah, we definitely need something to take this guy out, or be able to take him out if we need it. Now, we speculated that this could be, if Godzilla, if he didn't really have a heel turn, he could be perceived as making a heel turn, and then either people aren't going to view him the same way, or he may not view people the same way. So it's very likely, and you're right, like I touched upon that in the court of public opinion, based on if people don't have all the details, that Kong will definitely be the one they will like more than Godzilla. But even if they do have all the details, again, he destroyed a lot of shit, and he killed a lot of people. And again, for Godzilla, he is, he's an ends justify the means kind of guy. So, he's looking at the big picture, making the omelet, breaking a few eggs. But that doesn't mean that the perception of Godzilla hasn't taken. It's clear it's taken, even in this movie, it's clear that it's taken a toll, his popularity. So the question is, how much of that is going to be forgiven, even if they know what really went down, and there's evidence to support what really went down. So I think no matter what you would suspect, that there's an element that would have changed where he can't just count on either the people helping him or get out of the way, and the people can't count on Godzilla helping them and not causing undue damage or trying to do the best he can and not destroy stuff. But at the end, but I have to do what I have to do. That will have less confidence that he really cares about that, because he'll just destroy anything if he feels that it's quote unquote right. It does change and set up a different dynamic, which absolutely could be interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it lends, if you really dig into it, I think it lends to the fact that the public doesn't know everything. They can't, because what was his name? Nathaniel. When he is approached by Apex about the Hollow Earth thing, they talk about how his book is regarded as crackpot theory, so on and so forth. But he points, when he pitches the idea of a Titan leading them down there based on genetic memory, he points to a magazine with what's her name on it and talking about, like, calling her this Kong whisperer. And then the headlines from the end of Godzilla Godzilla King of the Monsters talk about Skull Island. So the public knows about Skull Island. The public knows that there's some geodestabilization in the region. They probably know about Monarch having a presence there because Monarch is government funded. They probably know Kong is contained there, at least by them. But some other stuff that was revealed in King of the Monsters was that Hollow Earth theory was real. That hasn't been told to the public. Otherwise, his book wouldn't be a flop, and he'd be considered a crackpot. So they're not telling people everything, which, shocker, government. But like they're actively withholding information. So I wouldn't guess that wouldn't continue after these events.
No, I agree.
Kind of a prevent panic sort of a thing. Do you think the egg that was mentioned in the credits of King of King of the Monsters, was that the eggs and stuff, that the embryos and things we saw for Skullwalkers?
I don't think so. I still think that's supposed to be Mothra.
Yeah,
but obviously, what's also interesting is that if they needed help to get into Hollow Earth, then you assume they got the Skullcrawler eggs from Skull Island.
Yeah.
But how did Apex get them when Monarch was the one that had the presence there? So that's one of the interesting. It also raises the specter of what other kind of titans that they had that we didn't even get to see. The different versions of in the same families that they had captured to use as guinea pigs for Mechagodzilla to test the sync ups between the pilot and the body, and also to see just the effectiveness of the weaponry and everything. But yeah, I still think the egg is supposed to be Mothra.
So in putting all the pieces together of where a potential sequel could go, look, man, I don't want them in a way, like, look, it all depends on how they do it. Obviously, at the end of the day, regardless of what monster they choose, it's all about how they do it. I don't want them to go Mecha again, but I feel like everything's pointing towards Mecha Ghidorah. That's what I feel. You've got the tech, it's laying there. You've found out a way to tap into the mentality. You've got the skull. You know about the DNA. You have the power. Let's talk about the power source for a second. How in the world did they not need to get the actual sample to the surface?
Yeah, that made no sense. That's like the equivalent of friggin' taking a picture.
Yeah, I mean, because they talk. So look, the idea. So they get the sample. Well, hold on. Before we even get there, when Apex CEO is talking to Nathaniel and they're presenting the scans from their satellite that prove Hollow Earth is real, they talk about the energy signal down there being remarkably close to the energy signal of Godzilla, which is supposedly supposed to confirm that the two's origins are one and the same. So they already have readings of the energy signal down there and know enough about the said energy signal to compare it to the energy signal of Godzilla and know that the two are very closely linked. How then is going down there, withdrawing a core sample, and then sending the reading information to the surface any different than taking an energy reading from the satellite? If all they're doing is trying to mimic radiation wavelengths or whatever it is they're trying to do. Because I'm sort of thinking about it, like, as a comic book fan, I'm sort of thinking about it in terms of radiation. Because a sun is a sun is a sun. But depending on, density and age of the sun, it can either glow blue or white, or it can glow red, or like a red giant or a white dwarf or whatever, right? But it's all a sun. It's just during the aging cycle, and the different points in a sun's aging cycle depends on the radiation levels. So if all they're doing is reading energy signals to determine the exact radiation level needed, why doesn't the freaking scan from the satellite that is able to not only depict that there is a Hollow Earth, but apparently detect the tunnels all over the planet that lead to it, why is that not enough? You would think you'd have to have a core sample brought up.
Yeah, you would. You would think you actually needed the energy, that literally needed the energy, the snippet of the energy you just sucked out, that you actually needed that to inject it in to use as a fuel source.
Yes, exactly.
And it does. Yeah, that
like
part
putting
made no
kryptonite
sense.
Metallo.
Yeah, it made very little sense on that. When I first watched it, I picked up on that too. It's like but Isa Gonzalez, who's gorgeous, but you knew from the minute you saw her she was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, they really weren't trying to hide it, I think, but you could just tell. I mean, just the way they framed her in the helicopter. But when she said that, when they basically, they scooped up the sample and they basically did a reading on it and they sent it back to her father at the base. It's like, really? That's all they needed to do? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, but so here's my thinking, right? Apparently it's enough to just have the energy signature. So whatever, let's just go with that it is. We have the energy signature. Though the tech is destroyed, the tech still exists. They've also figured out how to, so there exists a market for Titan DNA, whether it's skin samples, fecal matter, radiation, whatever, it does not matter. Anything Titan, there's a market for. They possess Ghidorah's skull, which has regenerative abilities, and it apparently has either enough genetic memory or there's a brain in there somewhere or whatever, where they are able to power this huge mecha, and it's conscious enough to take over the mecha. All of these pieces just point to Mecha Ghidorah for me. And the fact that even though the CEO is gone, and so is his daughter, who you would think would be the next in line to inherit the company, whoever takes over Apex, whether Apex is still an entity or it's absorbed into another company or whatever, combined with public perception and what the public does or doesn't know or isn't told, all they know is it looks like this Mecha Godzilla was effective for at least a while. So public perception against Godzilla, add all this stuff that I just mentioned, the public would then have to support an initiative to build another mecha. And how is the mecha not Mecha Ghidorah? Like that's all I can think about in terms of the logistics, following the plot threads from each movie and just picking up on the pieces, like looking at the pieces that they picked up on from the first movie to take it to bring into King of the Monsters, looking at the pieces from King of the Monsters they picked up to bring into Godzilla versus Kong. Now I'm looking at the pieces of Godzilla versus Kong and trying to, think logistically about, okay, if they pick these pieces, then it would make sense if they also pick these pieces. I can't think of anything logistically speaking that doesn't equal Mecha Ghidorah and Mothra 2 of some reason.
It would seem that way. It's really weird or difficult to entirely figure out where they're going to go with this, which is partly by design, because much like we've talked about, they knew it too, that this movie was going to determine the fate of the legendary verse and where they were going. So they purposely did not leave you breadcrumbs and post-credit scenes, traditional post-credit scenes, since one was made, but then they actually just put it into the movie, so it's not actually after the credits. But they purposely did not want to point fingers in certain directions and tease and do this, because they were honest enough, they didn't know if this was going to continue. So we don't know. There are threads to pick up on, but there's no glaring threads to pick up on, like the crumbs that they've been laying out, all in all these movies. They've been laying some foundation for sequels and for the relationships between different monsters. Ghidorah, and then the Kong Godzilla rivalry thing, species wise, things like that. So they have more of a clear road, smooth sailing to go in different directions if they are going to. I would assume, and you mentioned this, so it's worth, before we talk about some more specific stuff in this movie, that from a box office perspective, especially considering that we're still in the pandemic and certainly domestically where there's not a lot open yet, that this movie is already making good money, considering, I mean, it's made over almost $122 million overseas, including, it made, I think it made like 60 million in China. 70. It opened in $70 million in China. It's in its first day, it made by a little over $9.5 million domestically. So it's on target where it might very well make for the 5 days, counting Wednesday through I guess Easter Sunday, that it's possible this movie is going to make over $30 million. which, in the big picture, if this was a normal box office condition, then that would be nothing. That'd be a horrible box office weekend. Considering we had nothing really close to anything close to a respectable opening for most movies that weren't ginormous in scope, having any kind of, $30 million opening weekend or first 5 days, legitimate box office, not like what Tenet kind of did, where nobody knows exactly how much they did on the opening weekend because they stuck like 5 or 6 days into one number. This was looking pretty good. You and I had also talked about that at the end of the day, because of the box office conditions, it really would come down to not necessarily a combination of what the critics and what the fans think of the movie. And so far, obviously, it's hit the ball out of the park with both of those. Critics surprisingly like it. Fans really like it. So I would be surprised, based on where we are now, that if there's not another movie in this series. Now, the question happens to be where they go from here, and whether the interest in this movie was just a one-off because you stuck King Kong and Godzilla together. And if you go back to just doing another Godzilla movie, is it going to drop back off again? Which is not to say Kong is the only reason this movie was successful, but the one thing Kong fans could say is that if this movie ends up, which would be really impressive, if this movie ends up making more money, even in a suppressed box office market, than King of the Monsters did, that it would just be funny if at the end of the day, even though probably it can't happen because unless it does really, really well overseas, that you could have the two biggest grossing movies in this series, and both of them at least have King Kong in them. And you can't say both of them have Godzilla in them. It'd be curious to see where they go with it. And it's also curious. That's why the movies, another thing that kind of bothered me about the structure of the movie related to the outcome, even though, yes, Kong had the final say and he had the final victory in any fight. So they kind of were throwing him that considering the movie was Kong's movie, really, it's Kong's story, but yet clearly Godzilla is the character that Legendary is investing in. So it seemed like an odd choice on both levels. I know Kong is more relatable, so that part, I guess that part does make a little sense, but it's weird that you're also building the movie around the more relatable character, but yet while you have him come across well, you also have him lose. So that's still kind of an interesting dynamic there. So it'll be curious to see, and who knows, they may just split the hairs and say, hey, we're going to do a Godzilla movie and we're going to do another King Kong movie.
Which, I mean, technically they've done. If Godzilla versus Kong is much more of a Kong flick, and I would agree with you, then that's 2 Godzilla movies, 2 Kong movies so far. Yes,
but I don't. Analytically, this is clearly a Kong movie. I don't think that's the way a lot of people are going to view it. I don't think they're just going to say, "Oh, this is more like a sequel to Skull Island than it was anything." I still think the perception will be that it's a Godzilla movie with Kong in it. It's just if you look at it structurally, it's much like, at the end of the day, Infinity War was like a Thanos movie with the Avengers in it, as opposed to Endgame, which was an Avengers movie with Thanos in it. It's similar in that kind of way. Even though, yes, the Avengers, if you add up all the Avengers and Guardians and screen time compared to Thanos, they're going to have more of it, but still. But it's a logical choice to make Kong the sympathetic, more relatable character because he is. I mean, he's more human. He has more emotion. He's more intelligent. He has more emotional intelligence. And the fact that you add in the sign language capacity that you learned from Rebecca Hall and Gia, Kaylee Hoddle's character, that now you actually not just reading his eyes and his expressions, you really get to understand in simple terms. It's not like he has a soliloquy here that goes on for like 5 minutes, but you delve into his thoughts and what, where he's coming from. It made perfect sense he would be the focal point of the other two monsters, but that also opens the door where that maybe, to go back to just the same formula they're using Godzilla and King of the Monsters without Kong in it and just Godzilla doing his thing again. I don't know, because like you talked about, the human stuff in this movie is a mixed bag. I think the Team Kong stuff works. I think Alexander Skarsgård I'm going to say he's surprisingly good, but that's not because I think he stinks. It's because he plays against type. This is an Eric Northman from True Blood here, super stud, walking around shirt off all the time. he's kind of played as this goofy, outcast, kind of nerd character. So which is a brave choice on his part. I mean, to kind of go against type, but some people don't like his character. I thought it kind of worked. I like Rebecca Hall's character. Obviously, everybody liked Gia. Almost every review says Gia, since that was like Kaylee Hoddle's first movie, and that her background is interesting because her pretty much everybody in her family is deaf, and I think like something like 5 or 6 generations on her father's side happen to be deaf. So obviously that's genetic, but it's just interesting. But I think the stuff on Team Kong, not counting the Apex insertion, that the infiltrators, I thought that stuff worked. But I like Millie Bobby Brown, but I didn't give it a one rat's ass about all that stuff. Like I mentioned before, we know why it's in the movie. It's just to justify and explain. It opens the door for Mechagodzilla showing up without him just showing up and people going, what is that and where did he come from?
Yeah, they utterly wasted her father's character.
Oh, yeah. Kyle Chandler there probably filmed like his entire all his scenes probably like in like 1 or 2 days or a week max, depending if they had to go on different locations. But yeah, but we also have to remember this though, and I almost forgot about this. Somebody mentioned this, that remember this movie was rewritten and re-edited, so we don't know how much was lost in translation, because I forgot that our girl Colleen Wing there, Jessica Henwick was supposed to be in this movie, but Ji Zhang was supposed to be in this movie, and both those characters are completely absent from the final cut.
Which were they? Which characters were they?
I thought Ji Zhang was in King of the Monsters.
Was she one of the Asian sisters?
Yeah, I think so.
Whose family has a history with Mothra?
Yeah, I think so. And Colin and what's her face? Jessica Henwick, I think, was going to play a new character. But I had completely forgot. Somebody mentioned that all these characters were completely cut from the movie, and I had completely forgotten that when the cast was first announced, that was true. They were cast for the movie.
Yeah, but Millie, her father is just her father drives me up a wall, because first, obviously we didn't see him in the first Godzilla movie, but they make sure that they let you know that there's their presence was there in San Francisco. After everything that happened in San Francisco, after all of his firsthand involvement in understanding what the hell was going on behind the scenes, Godzilla versus Ghidorah, after understanding Godzilla's intentions, after understanding what monarchs after understanding everything, the fact that he just so quickly dismisses her is so ridiculous to me. The fact that he sat there and watched his son died, and though she was his ex-wife, she sacrifices herself at the feet of 2 titans to save them. Like, he has seen some major loss, and this little girl is all he has left, and he's not going to listen to her. It'd be one thing if she wasn't involved, but she helped with the orca. Her mom taught her a lot of stuff. She knows what's going on. She's got the background. She's got the intellectual understanding of what her mother was doing with the orca, enough to grab it, and she got the balls to run over to the baseball field to lure Ghidorah there. He's so dismissive of her, it drives me insane. It's ridiculous. But everything they do is just sort of stumbling in. I did like the conspiracy theorist dude, Bernie. I thought he was funny. I thought he was cool. I thought it was a welcome addition. I liked that he got to play serious for a minute when he went to the story of his wife and everything. It really humanized that character in the 5 seconds we got to see that, and it was delivered well. I had no use for the best friend. And the fact that Bernie is supposed to be an engineer, and he's not just infiltrating Apex and pretending he has the credentials for an engineer. He is clearly savvy enough to get a job with Apex as an engineer. He's had to showcase aptitude with that. But then the high school kid, the fat buddy, is the one that's supposed to hack Mechagodzilla, and he's the one that figures out pouring water on an electric board doesn't mix with the engineer standing next to him.
Because that summer camp HTML didn't work.
Jesus Christ. But whatever. So yeah, I agree with you that whole plot thread was wasted.
It's slow. It's the worst part of it. And again, maybe I would have viewed it differently if I wasn't, in my mind, racing against time to watch this movie because I wanted to finish it in one sitting. But and I didn't want to be going to bed at like 5:30 in the morning to get up at 8:30 in the morning, maybe I would have been more patient to be able to watch to with those scenes in the movie. But I do feel it absolutely sucks the air out of the room. It kills whatever momentum is in, because you're interested in why Godzilla's doing what he's doing, and you kind of get it, and I guess they kind of give you that in a way too. But the majority of the movie, again, if the movie, maybe if it was more of a Godzilla movie, and since she's on Team Godzilla technically, that by luck, not because she's anti-Kong either, it's just by luck of the draw, that the reality is maybe it would work better for me, or maybe it just would work better in the movie. But again, it seemed really, really forced. But again, it's one of those things where, heaven forbid, hints throwing these words out there, we don't know what the original cut of the movie was like before they did their post King of the Monster, reshoots, because they were scared shitless that this movie was gonna repeat all the mistakes, which just hints that there probably was more human stuff, which may be why the Xi Zhang and Jessica Chadwick characters got written out, because they already had enough, arguably too much human stuff, and maybe that's why Kyle Chandler's role got reduced to basically 3 or 4 lines.
Yeah. I think we're sort of winding down the thought. Oh, one of the things I wanted to mention. Sorry, 2 things. One we can get out of the way really quick. The blade of the axe, is that a Godzilla spine? I don't necessarily mean this specific Godzilla.
Yes, I think it's pretty clear that it is. Yes.
Yeah, it looks like a spine. It lights up like a spine. I'm pretty sure it's an ancient Godzilla spine, dorsal fin or whatever the hell we call it. Then I'm thinking about maybe I'm thinking too much here, reading too much into a movie that I started this whole friggin' episode off by saying it's a monster fight movie. Don't read into it. But the Hollow Earth, once we got to like the temple, there was the big carved hand, and there was the temple and the carved statues of Kong, and the throne. Are we supposed to be led to believe that either A, Hollow Earth once housed humans of some kind, and they worshiped the Titans and built all this? Because if you go based on the little bit of Hollow Earth we saw in King of the Monsters, humans clearly worship Titans, but how far back does that relationship go? And does it extend all the way to the Hollow Earth in itself? Or are we supposed to be led to believe that there was a massive colony of Kong, I don't know what else to tell them, of Kongs down there that were not only smart enough to build and harness energy, but carve statues and create a throne, like it had a whole culture down there? Which of those two are we supposed to believe?
I don't know if they have to be mutually exclusive. I don't know if it has to be one or the other. I think both are. I think clearly, if you had to pick one based on what we see in this movie, you have to say more evidence supports the idea of Kong's race originally being there before they ever moved, migrated to Skull Island, or some of them. Because we still, of course, don't know there aren't more of them somewhere in Hollow Earth. Because
Hollow Earth is supposed to be the size of the moon, basically. Yeah,
and they only explored a relatively small part, you assume. But if you had to bet one, you'd say yes, that they originated because of the axe, because of the hand paw print, the throne room, which were the throne, which was nicely sized for someone like of Kong's full maturity. They certainly could be intelligent, and if they had tools enough that were to do carving. But I don't necessarily know, like I said, that it has to be mutually exclusive. Could be both. They could have been worshipped by, who knows? Maybe the people on Skull Island, maybe some of the people on Skull Island originated in Hollow Earth, and they all migrated together. But I don't think there's one definitive answer. But if you had to bet one, I'd bet more that this is where Kong's species originally came from.
So I wanted to end with I've seen I don't want to say I've seen a lot of criticism of this movie online, but one of the critiques I saw was so funny to me in the moment I had to screenshot it. This person says, "I thought it was mostly trash," and then they said, "Godzilla can sense Kong on a ship from wherever, but everything was fine as long as they had him in a Monkey Truman show."
He's an ape.
I know. But
He's an ape. I know. I'm not. This wasn't a shot at you. Lots of people do that. It's really effing annoying since monkeys are much further down the evolutionary scale. If he doesn't have a tail,
an ape Truman Show. I thought that was hilarious.
Well, obviously, as we know, the containment field was sufficient enough to block out lots of things from getting in.
Well, I think the storm itself is also supposed to do that.
Well, yeah, as natural cover, yes, but I'm saying the containment field also, besides trying to protect what was left of Skull Island, it's the reality is it was also, as I think Rebecca Hall refers to the fact that, you know, basically you take them out of here, which would also probably be the equivalent of, to me, that basically since the island is, we know the island is starting to go under. They mentioned the fact that it can't sustain him much longer because of his size. That if they just dropped that extra block, that the odds are Godzilla would sense him and come for him. So, no matter when the containment field was built or when the concept of it was originated, and they said, because you would assume, since the Kong thing, they didn't really know about Kong for sure until the 70s, and Godzilla, even though he showed up in the 50s and he kind of disappeared again until modern times, that you probably jumped to the fact that they really weren't building they may not have built that containment field or even came up with the concept until 2014 when they realized, this guy's back and we need to make sure that we need to protect Kong, since obviously they saw Kong in a much different light than, understandably so, but unsurprisingly so based on it being intellectual about it. But we know that's not the way human beings are a lot, and certainly, and in movies and King Kong's history, that's not the way people have been. To see him in a different light and not try to exploit him or hurt him or anything else, to basically to be interested in him, to want to study him in his environment, but be pretty content to leave him alone and see him as a worst case scenario, chaotic neutral, if nothing else, and just let him do what he needs to do. So but it was kind of cool that there were enough people at Monarch that wanted to protect Kong and were afraid of Godzilla coming for him.
Yeah. That's all I got for it. I was going to mention the death toll in this. I felt the financial damage toll. Well, I mean, yeah, but I was specifically referring to the death toll because I felt like it. I don't know why. For some reason, it felt more in your face on this one, which isn't to say that the others didn't show it, because in the first one, I very specifically remember when Godzilla wades into Hawaii, the tidal wave that accompanies him sweeps a lot of people away, right? So, a lot of people died there. Obviously, half of San Francisco gets trashed. So, with buildings collapsing and stuff, people are dead, but you don't really see a lot of just people's broken bodies or whatever, right? In King of the Monsters, DC gets flooded or whatever, and a volcano explodes while Rodan jumps out of it, and then when he flies over, people get sucked up into the sky. You see death and destruction, but I don't know. I just felt like in this one, I felt it a little bit more, like when Godzilla rips one of the battleships in half and half of it gets snagged on him and it gets drugged underwater. You see some people floating out of flying out of the half of the ship, floating up. So you see those bodies. I feel like I felt the death toll more in this film. And honestly, the most I've ever felt a death toll in any of these films was actually Skull Island, which is interesting because maybe it was just because you have a finite amount of people and you're counting down. Either they get taken out by skull walkers or the other indigenous insects or whatever that are on the island, one by one by one. See, in some of the deaths, those big freaking forest spider things, when that dude looks up and one of the legs comes straight through his mouth and into the ground, the blood spurting and stuff, that was definitely you in your face death toll, but was only contained to 30 people, something like that.
Probably.
So I just thought, I don't know why, because it's not like the other films have been absent of, in implied death toll, but I felt like I felt it more in this film.
But I think you're supposed to, because that's that's kind of the whole point. I mean, well, not the whole point, but it raises the stakes in this, because it's not just, well, everybody's perception of, and belief of what Godzilla was, even though, like we've talked about a lot, that they kind of gave you the hint one way or the other in King of the Monsters, based on that dialogue, that he's on our side for now, that one way or the other, that perception was going to change, even if there wasn't a real heel turn, that the perception of Godzilla was going to change, that was pretty much foreshadowed. But the idea that the conflict and the urgency of a lot of what they're doing, even though everybody's motivations are clearly not the same, the catalyst for all of this, in a way, is what Godzilla's doing. That he's kind of like the catalyst. So to see all the destruction and the death, and on the surface not know where and why, where it's coming from and why, I think that's done on purpose. So I think it suits the plot's needs, I believe.
All right. Anything else about this film?
One thing, I think Adam Wingard he gets credit for working a lot of stuff in the mythology into these movies. I do think that, and we talked about this too in the past, that when he shoved the axe down Godzilla's throat, that was kind of given. I think most people expected that because Adam Wingard said there was going to be a scene where basically it was going to be a callback to, one of the things people remember most about King Kong versus Godzilla. Now that opened the door for one of two things. It was either going to be the axe, Kong sticking something down Godzilla's throat to prevent him from shooting out the lightning, or Kong getting supercharged by electricity. Now, we don't really get supercharged by electricity, but we do get him charged up and from being defeated and back on his feet again, with Skarsgård doing that with the ship. So I thought that was a nice touch. That you basically get probably two of the most memorable moments from King Kong versus Godzilla. They were brought in, plus the fighting in the water, was, even though they didn't really fight much in the water in the original, but that's how it ended, when they tumbled into the water and only King Kong swam away. The CGI was fantastic. The fight scenes were good. They were pretty elaborate and they were lengthy. So which is not what we've gotten a lot of in the previous movies. We may have gotten several fight scenes like in King of the Monsters, but none of them really lasted all that long. So you did have some sizable fight scenes in this movie, and that really worked. So I do like it, and I think overall it was successful. Like I said, just personally, I still think they should have given Kong a little bit more of his due in the fight, because I think the one thing they downplayed in this movie was his physical strength. I mean, that's one of the things that should be an absolute given about Kong, how strong he is. And it just didn't seem like that resonated all that much in any of his fight scenes, even when he was on Hollow Earth. It just didn't seem like it seemed like that was I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase it. It just was downplayed, and that bothered me more. I just think there were ways they could have worked around having him lose, where you knew he lost, but it was pretty decisive that he lost. And yeah, the other thing, which I'm glad, because I didn't even write it down, but I'm glad I remembered it now, that I did like after he got supercharged, well, in quotes, supercharged. I did like the Lethal Weapon moment when he relocated his dislocated shoulder when he banged it into the building to knock it back into place. So, which is kind of funny unto itself, because obviously we have to take from this that Kong must have a trick shoulder, because he must have dislocated it in the past, or else he would have no idea how to. I don't think that would be natural instinct. Oh, my shoulder hurts and it's out of place. Let me ram it really hard into something. I mean, he is intelligent, but I don't think that's instinctual. You know what I mean? So I can only suspect that probably happened to him at some other point in his life. So he kind of figured out, oh, this is how you get it back into place. So it was, again, I wish he had done a little bit better, or it was more of a draw, since Kong did kind of lose decisively 2 of the 3 rounds. But I mean, he got a happy ending, at least for now, and he did get to deliver the decisive. I will openly admit, though, when Kong and Godzilla, when they start fighting together, that kind of is it's not a Cap getting the hammer moment, but it kind of gives you a similar kind of vibe. For me, kind of gives me like the chills. And I've watched that scene like about 4 or 5 times now. That when that happens, that kind of pumps me up. First when Kong just shows up to save Godzilla, but then when Godzilla gets up and grabs Mecha Godzilla's arm, and then they're both together pulling Mecha Godzilla away. I thought that was pretty cool, and Kong doing a number on him with the supercharged axe thanks to Godzilla. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm glad at the very least, to balance the equation, they let Kong basically take out Mecha Godzilla and have that moment of victory when he rips the head and the spine out.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed it. I think I'm looking forward to getting it on Blu-ray, just having it on the shelf. I think it'll be cool. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else. The stuff I said I was gonna at the beginning of the episode I might have had. I actually just remembered Dan and I talked about at the end of the Green Lantern wrap-up episode. So never mind. All right. I guess that means wrap-up. People want to reach out to us. How do they do so?
LanternCast@gmail.com. The website is LanternCast.com. You can follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook, #GeoCast to track us down there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. We are on all of those. So whichever ones you listen to us on, please leave us a positive review. And last but not least, to text or voicemail us, 708-LANTERN is that number. And let us know what you think.
All right. Do we know what's next?
Actually, almost refreshingly, no. We don't know what we're doing next. When is the Thorn book out?
Next week.
Possibly. And when is Far Sector out?
Next week.
The only problem is we'd have to record. We'd have a really quick turnaround unless we're going to do a skip week. Which, to be fair, we're kind of entitled to a skip week because we put out I think 4 or 5 episodes in a row. I think.
Which, by the way, guys, we're doing. I don't know if I mentioned this on air. So last week, right now we're recording this. It's April 1st, Thursday. Last week I was off of work because I wanted to just take some mental time. Right. Turned out to not make much of a vacation because I found out that the new management company that's going to be taking over my apartment complex is not allowing people to renew their lease because they're changing up the full format. Long story short, but basically I live in a situation where it's roommate matching and I lease the bedroom, not the whole unit, right? And we all split utilities. It's all pre-split. Well, they're not going to do, the new management company is going to do a more traditional 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom rent the whole unit sort of situation. So in order to do that, they need to remodel, which means once your lease is up, your lease is up. There's no option to renew. So suddenly, halfway through my quote unquote vacation, where I'm supposed to be taking a mental break to reassess things and relax, I have to suddenly figure out how I'm going to move within the next month or less. So now I got to find a place and moving logistics and blah, blah, blah. I ended up finding a place. It's a 5-minute walk from my sister's house. It'll be good for me. And it's my own place. But I got the keys today. And I don't turn in the keys to this place I'm currently at until the 26th of April, which means I'm paying for 2 places during the month of April. And not only that, but I am going to be moving slowly every other weekend or every weekend or whatever, whenever I have time, slowly things over from one place to another. So my free time might be a little limited. So banking up some episodes is actually going to help us out a little bit in terms of keeping up with the schedule. But a skip week might be needed, as Mark said. So,
I mean, well, we can, again, it depends. We can, there may very well be a skip week just because, in a way, by having a skip week, it would allow us. It still would allow us we would not necessarily be skipping recording. It just means we would be skipping releasing. Yeah. Because we could potentially record back, and that way we could potentially record maybe either back-to-back episodes in one night or on back-to-back days, and then I'd have to be under the pressure to, by the way, you have one night to get this all done and release it. It's kind of nice. It's nice when you have more time, which is one of the reasons why we were able to put out the Snyderverse episode. Technically, it was up Tuesday night, but we didn't push it until Wednesday of this week. So it's actually very nice having that much time. So you can just maybe get started on it and just leave it and then just sit down and do half of what's left the next day and so forth and so on. It is better than recording on a Wednesday and having to have it out on a Friday.
Right. But yeah, next week the 7th is Far Sector 11. Green Lantern 1, Crime Syndicate 2. I guess that counts since there's, the Green Lantern of that Earth 3 that shows up there. And then I think we have another break week because I don't think I see anything here for the week of the 14th. That would be Green Lantern coverage related. So we wouldn't have to necessarily worry about catching up there. And I don't think the week after the 21st, because Justice League, the new Justice League title or creative team does not have a Green Lantern on that, at least yet. But I'm reading it, so I guess we'll end up seeing, and I'm not seeing anything else. So I'm pretty sure that there's really nothing until either the end of April, if not the beginning of May, after that first batch next week.
So the odds are we will do those. Probably maybe we'll do those back to back. Are you up to date on Winter Soldier so far?
There's only 2 episodes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I assume we'll do an episode on that once it wraps up next month. Or yeah, it'll. Are there 5? There's 5 weeks this month, right? So maybe it might wrap up this month. I'm looking at the calendar. This is what 3 comes out tonight. 4, 5. Yeah, it will wrap up. It will wrap up this month. So probably by the end of the month we could actually record.
Yeah, the next issue of Green Lantern doesn't come out until the 5th of May.
Yeah, so that's so in theory. Now, don't take this to heart, but this is just us spitballing, which we do once in a while. So maybe, in a way, potentially the next 3 releases after this one could be Far Sector in Green Lantern in whatever order, and then maybe the Winter Soldier one. And
then the next thing I see that's Green Lantern related, I don't know if you saw it in the solicits, but I think it was a digital first. I don't know, but there's something on May 11th called Justice League Last Ride. And the cover has the Trinity, but in the background it looks like the planet Mogo.
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've got myself down at my LCS to get it, but I don't. Who knows? And then I'm trying to find the solicit for Far Sector number 12, and I'm just not seeing it anywhere yet. So, yeah, it looks like we're pretty sparse on stuff. It'll just be Green Lantern, and then we just would want to decide if we want to cover the Green Lantern stuff that's in Crime Syndicate at all, or just touch on it briefly or anything like that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. The good news, at least, we know we have two regular Green Lantern issues coming out with Far Sector and the new series. So at least we know we're not completely going away from Green Lantern material, considering we just did the Green, we finished up the Morrison run, and then we've had 2 movie related episodes, and then we're gonna probably have 2 Green Lantern comic related episodes. So we're still balancing it out pretty well.
Yeah, I'm paging through because I think we have more. I thought we had more stuff. Oh, the Pride issue. The Pride issue will have Alan Scott stuff in it, and then of course we have to consider whenever the Infinite Frontier stuff ends up continuing.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think that's until June or.
Yeah, I'm certainly have no issue if we want to do the Infinite Frontier mini, no matter how we decide to do it. If we decide to just break it into have like 2 episodes, was it 6 issues? I think that thing is. That if you want to split it up into 2 and just do 1 through 3, or we want to split it up into thirds and do 2. Let's see how it is first. But I know Alan's going to be in it, so it would make sense that we do it. Barry will be in it.
June 1st is when Far Sector ends,
which isn't that far away.
And that same week is Green Lantern 3, Crime Syndicate 4, which has that power ring or Green Lantern, whatever, the Emerald Knight on the cover. So. Yeah, but I don't think Infinite Frontier is supposed to start until mid-June, early July, something like that, in terms of the ongoing series. So, yeah, DC Pride doesn't come out until June 8th, so that'll have the Allen story in it. So, yeah, it's going to be a little while. For a little while, we're just going to have Green Lantern to talk about, and then, like I said, Crime Syndicate maybe if we want.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yep. All right, guys. We will talk to you later.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.